If you've ever considered the preterist view, you might have noticed that many reject it because they assume it leaves too many unanswered questions. But have you ever thought about the unanswered questions of the futurist perspective? Questions that, in fact, the preterist view addresses clearly and consistently. Let's take a look. First, let's ask, why did Jesus repeatedly emphasize that his return would occur within the lifetime of his first-century audience? In Matthew 24:34, he says, "This generation will not pass away until all these things take place." How does futurism explain this generation? Why would Jesus tie his prophecies so explicitly to the people standing in front of him if he was speaking about events thousands of years later? Another challenge for futurism comes from Jesus' repeated warnings for people to watch and be ready. In passages like Matthew 24:42, he tells his audience, "Therefore stay awake, for you do not know on what day your Lord is coming." Why would Jesus give such urgent warnings to his first-century disciples if his return wasn't going to happen for thousands of years? Wouldn't that warning lose its urgency if it wasn't meant for them? Then there's the issue of the Old Covenant. Jesus says in Matthew 5:18, "Truly I say to you, until heaven and earth pass away, not an iota, not a dot will pass from the law until all is accomplished." Here's the question, if heaven and earth haven't passed away, shouldn't every jot and tittle of the law still be in effect today? That would mean sacrifices, ceremonial obligations, and dietary restrictions should still be binding. The preterist view resolves this by understanding that heaven and earth is symbolic language referring to the Old Covenant system, the temple, the priesthood, and Israel's identity as a physical nation. When Jerusalem and the temple were destroyed in AD 70, the Old Covenant passed away, and with it, the law's ceremonial requirements, fulfilling Jesus' words. Futurism also struggles with imminence. Over and over the New Testament writers stress the nearness of Christ's return. Paul tells the Romans, "The night is far gone, the day is at hand." James writes, "The coming of the Lord is at hand." Peter says, "The end of all things is at hand." How can futurism reconcile these urgent statements with a delay of over 2 millennia? Was the New Testament wrong about the timing? What about the destruction of Jerusalem in AD 70? Why does futurism downplay this event when it so perfectly aligns with Jesus' prophecies in Matthew 24? Jesus describes wars, famines, false prophets, and the destruction of the temple, saying, "Not one stone will be left upon another." This was fulfilled exactly as he predicted. Why would Jesus include this specific prophecy if it was unrelated to his return? Revelation poses even more questions for futurism. Why does John repeatedly say the events of the book must soon take place and that the time is near? Why write this to first-century churches if the majority of its events would be irrelevant to them? Wouldn't this have been misleading to his original audience? Finally, let's consider the ultimate significance of Christ's mission. If his return is still in the future, what was the purpose of his death, resurrection, and ascension? Did these events leave the world in a holding pattern for thousands of years, waiting for the real fulfillment? Why would Jesus declare on the cross, "It is finished," if the key aspects of his mission are still incomplete? The preterist perspective answers all these questions. It acknowledges that Jesus kept his word to his first-century audience. His return, his kingdom, and his judgment were real, tangible, and meaningful to the people he directly spoke to. The destruction of Jerusalem marked the definitive end of the Old Covenant and the full establishment of the New Covenant era, a spiritual kingdom that continues to grow and transform lives. The preterist view doesn't ignore Scripture. It takes Jesus at his word. It provides consistent answers to the questions that futurism leaves unresolved. So the real question is, are we willing to challenge our assumptions and consider that Jesus fulfilled his promises exactly as he said he would?